Anti-Afro, Spengalis. Shout out to the average white band. We have work to do because there's unfinished business. And before I detail what I'm referring to, I'm going to go ahead and play this portion of a conversation Kip had with Wayne Williams, who's an investigator for the Peace Officer Standards of Training in Georgia. And he was over the division, or he was assigned to the division where Antonio Johnson was working. He conducted the investigation, and there's some very interesting comments that he made that I'm going to address. So stay tuned and I will return.
In Johnson's case, there's no criminal case tied to this at this point. So I'll be closing this case fairly soon. I'm pretty confident in that. So we'll go on the premise the criminal case at this time involved with it.
Is this guy still being paid off taxpayer dollars while he's sitting out?
Oh, he's not employed in law enforcement. He can go work somewhere else, but he can't work in law enforcement. Let me rephrase it. He is not working in law enforcement. Based on him being his separation status from the agency, he can go work somewhere else if they'll hire him. But in some cases, some agencies, just might do that. A lot of agencies won't because they know that if he gets revoked, they're going to have to do one of two things. They're going to fire him or put him in a non-foreign position.
These are facts.
Now, another question. Would you consider hacking into the system like he did my son and myself and looking us up and we're not under his supervision at all? Would you consider that a crime?
Not necessarily. Probably not. Because he does have access to the system. It's a policy violation if that's what he did. And, and now we're starting to teeter on things I can't really talk about.
What did they say? It's not a crime. They said it's a policy violation. To them, they'll be like, I told y'all, it's not a crime. It's not a crime. But they're not thinking. Of course, the police department is not going to make it a crime if they can help it. Because they'll have to pay for the crime. Y'all had to hurry up and jump because it's y'all Negroes that caused Drama to lose his job. That's what it is. Y'all pumped his head up and this is what happened.
Okay, I pulled out these quotes from Wayne Williams, except for one, comes from Kip. And I want to address these because the issue I have with this discussion, I'm going to be upfront, it lacked candor. It lacked candor on the part of the investigator named Wayne Williams, who works for Post. And in order to be an investigator for the Peace Officer Standards of Training, you also have to be Post certified. I don't know his background, but I'm not convinced that he made statements knowing full well what he said was accurate. A lack of candor. And let me start with no criminal case tied to this at this time. I just simply point you back to what you just heard the smoke say. They don't want it to be a crime because they're going to be responsible. AKA, they are going to treat this case as if a crime wasn't committed. So how do we go about making that process move with respect to a crime being committed? Well, in order for a crime to be acknowledged, there needs to be a police report. Now, there are multiple different agencies who meet the criteria to file a police report with respect to a process being placed underway, like the formal process. We can file police reports, absolutely. We can call, we can say what happened, but an agency has to be in a position to interact with the district attorney or the prosecuting agency that would bring charges. That can't happen just with us making a report. But since you have the probation department, their system was compromised. So they are a victim. There are multiple other victims. But the probation department is the crime victim that has the authority to file a report to a charging agency. They have that position that they're in. We are not in that position. If we file a report, we're at the mercy of the law enforcement agency who receives it. The probation department doesn't have any barrier. Probation department can simply say, listen, we have an employee here who accessed the system in a manner that was unauthorized. They didn't do that. But hold on, I'm going to come back to that. I want to get through these other issues, then I'm going to come back to whether it's a crime or not. So you heard the statement sworn versus non-sworn. A sworn peace officer, first and foremost, takes an oath to uphold the Constitution of their state and the United States. That does not have anything to do with whether or not they will be held to a higher standard if they violate the law. The law is the law. In Georgia, probation officers are not sworn. They still have the same responsibility to follow rules and regulations. They don't have a lesser requirement, or they're not held to a lower standard as far as discipline. The discipline is the discipline as far as regulations and rules and even criminal offenses, which we're going to get to. Sworn police officers have the authority to carry a firearm 24/7, associated with their professional role. Security guards can carry weapons or not as part of their job, but they're not authorized to carry a weapon 24/7 as it relates to their job, nor do security guards have to be sworn to carry a weapon as part of their job duties. It just depends on the type of job that the security officer has. But keep in mind, you have to follow security guards' instructions when you're on their property and they're in control of that property, obviously. And if you don't follow those instructions, you can be placed under arrest, plain and simple. And if you strike a security guard anywhere in the United States, that's the same thing as striking a sworn police officer. You are assaulting a peace officer. It makes no difference whether that security guard is sworn or not, or whether he or she has a weapon. It's the same charge that you're going to receive. Under any circumstance, they can lawfully take you into custody. Now, probation officers have the ability to arrest as well, but the circumstances are quite different. They're not as broad. Now, if they witness a crime right in front of their faces and they're trying to preserve safety and they're able to restrain someone, they can do that. But transporting them in a vehicle, that becomes more arduous, and they stay away from that. That is the instruction. You're supposed to call law enforcement to come and address the issue. Also want to say something that some people are not aware of. Being placed under arrest does not have to mean that you are taken down in a police car and booked. You can be arrested because the officer is telling you you are not free to leave, and I'm going to give you this summons, this requirement that you appear in court. This is a misdemeanor crime, and we're not going to take you into custody, but you are under arrest for the purposes of me filling this form out. Now, this is not a traffic ticket. This is a criminal offense. I'm not talking about traffic offenses. No, you just can't take off if you're pulled over. So sworn officers have the powers of arrest. Now, in the state of Georgia, parole officers who supervise people who've been in state prison, they have powers of arrest. Correctional officers have powers of arrest. Police officers have powers of arrest, which means 24/7, they're able to take you into custody. They actually do discourage that practice unless it's absolutely critical. Now, the other statement you heard, hacking into the system. Kip asked the question, can he be charged for hacking. This is a very distinct difference between unauthorized access. So hacking means you use an illegal method to get into a system that you legally don't have a right to be in any regard. Breaking into someone's computer, stealing somebody's password, using subversive techniques or methods to get into anything, an account, email, getting into social media, getting into email systems, getting into bank records. That is hacking. You have no legal right to get into the system, and the person who owns the system didn't give you permission to be there. So that's a felony. So what Wayne Williams stated, and this is where the lack of candor comes in with respect to what he said to Kip. Kip was questioning whether or not this is a crime and was pretty much telling him or asking, with knowing the answer, how can it not be a crime? Like, what's happening here? And this is where I have an issue with Wayne Williams, the investigator, who is post certified. I would love to know what job he had before. He says, probably not a crime necessarily. And that, my friends, is a false statement. I don't want to be rude and disrespectful because this investigator gave us some of what we wanted, but we shouldn't be satisfied because the statement is false, people. What he's trying to tell you is, or what he actually did say, you can go back and listen to it. He said since Antonio Johnson had access to the system already, it would be a policy violation. I mean, it's ridiculous. What Wayne Williams did was essentially default to the lesser of two evils. Yeah, it's a policy violation, but he's not letting Kip know what he did. What Antonio Johnson did, what DJ Drama did, is a criminal offense. And the necessity to access the information is of a life and death situation. You need to know who you're dealing with at all times, as far as their history. But nowhere would it ever be acceptable to pick the lesser of two evils by relegating this down to a policy violation when there have been federal offenses and state-based offenses. Take a look at this, people. Before Antonio Johnson sat his ass down at a desk and started typing into the system to look people up, he went through the interview process. He went through the background investigation. And he went through orientation. And when you go through orientation, we all know what that entails, a bunch of forms. According to your profession, that's going to dictate what forms they're going to place in front of you and have you sign them. Whether or not a peace officer is sworn or non-sworn, they all in Georgia are required to sign the Georgia Crime Information Center Awareness Statement. I'll go a step further. It doesn't need to be a profession. Whatever job that you take, you need to fill out forms, and they have you sign forms acknowledging policies, procedures, rules, and regulations. So let's talk about what a peace officer in Georgia does when they're hired. Every single one of them is presented with the Georgia Crime Information Center Awareness Statement. It is important that you read this statement very carefully. Better yet, you can ignore what I have on the screen. Type into any search engine, Georgia Crime Information Center Awareness Statement. You're going to see a statement pop up. Now, you'll see different ones because they get revised. This is very specific as to the expectations legally that peace officers have when they're granted access to Georgia's Crime Information Center.